Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to have you coming in. I see Joanne and Sharon and Laura and Maria and Athena, Carter, Gail, Carol, Heidi, Rebecca, Charlene, Kat, Jeffrey Kat, or Kat Jeffrey. So this is great to have you guys here. I love having these webinars. I'm Sarah Cooperman. I'm the CEO of SCW Fitness Education. I've got three great panelists. I feel we've got Ann Gilbert. Oh, thank you, Ann. Saved us during the pandemic, did so many webinars, so many manias. Same with Robert Linkle. And then we've got our virgin, Deborah Rothschild. This is her first webinar. I know, now I made her super nervous, but she's wonderful. She's presented at Manias. She's with a program, she developed a program called Tough Agers, which is very, very successful. Deborah's got her master's degree in exercise science with a specialization in fitness and wellness. And like I mentioned, she has a continuing education program called Tough Agers. She has it online, but she also has it on Zoom, and she's running one of her live stream sessions. I believe, when are you doing it, Deborah?
In September.
In September. So we'll make sure that we put that information in the chat box for you guys. But she's certified by everybody. I don't even want to read all of them. And I don't want to read all the different topics she's certified in because it's kind of, I'm jealous. And then we've got the beautiful Ann Gilbert, who she owns Shapes Fitness for Women. Ann is so amazing that during COVID, she was doing a chair workout. And I don't know if you guys know, but Ann choreographed, I think it was 14 different releases. Was it 12 releases or 14 releases for Water in Motion? For 4 years, she did this, which is Water in Motion Platinum, which is an active aging water program. But she also does a chair program that she was doing. So during COVID, what are we going to do with our water people? Put them in a bathtub, and tell them to, yeah. So she said, why don't we offer our aqua people a chair program? And it caught on, and I don't know, you can see the banner in the background, but it's Seat Fitness. And I know Carter will put the link into it, but she was ACE and URSA's personal trainer of the year. She's on TV regularly on Fox News in Florida. She manages a staff of 50, and she has an extremely successful active aging clientele base. Robert Linkle is just one of my favorite presenters in the world. He is trainingtheolderadult.com. He also does training programs online. So Deborah, Ann, and Robert are the leaders in active aging training. So Robert is fantastic. He owns a personal training studio, but it's a fixed, I should say, or within his home. He used to have an outside studio, and he opened one in his home. So I want you guys to listen to him, because if you're ever thinking about opening your own business, you're going to listen to Deborah, you're going to listen to Robert, and you're going to ignore Ann. I'm just kidding. Yes, she is a brick and mortar studio. You can't, that works, I'll tell you. And he's a 2017 NSCO Fellowship inductee. He won a personal trainer, NSCA's Personal Trainer of the Year award. So we got these great people. And we've got Carter Anderson, who puts together our webinars for us. We're going to be moving to a once a month webinar for SCW, once a month webinar. We're also going to continue on with doing a business webinar. So we're going to try to integrate that. So we're going to start right now, dive right in. If you have questions, this is your webinar. Yes, it's being recorded. Yes, we're going to put it on a podcast. So we have about 47 of you on right now. We'll end up, by the time we end, 55 or more. So, and then we have another, 130. Of that 130, we're going to get over 100 of you who are going to listen to recordings, but you guys are live. So go into the chat box. It's to the left of your green share button. Click on it, type your questions in. I would love to know your name and where you're from. All right, so try doing that. Oh, there's Amber Toole. We love Amber Toole. Amber actually leads our active aging nutrition certification. So everybody's got to learn. Look, we've got Heidi from Ocala. We've got Roberts in Las Vegas, baby. We've got someone from Bob Esqueri from Boca Raton. So if you have questions, Lorraine from Dallas, or Robin from Seattle, or Laura from Westchester, New York, if you got questions, type them in the chat. These guys love to answer this stuff. So I'm going to start. Deborah, I'm going to start with you. What are the key considerations when designing an exercise program for older adults? What do you look at? What's like the first thing you start doing?
So the first thing that I do is I ask them for their recent and past health and exercise history. And when I say I ask them, sometimes it is them. Sometimes the client is giving me that information and filling out the forms. Sometimes I've been hired by their adult children, so they will fill out the forms. And other times I get hired by a care manager, and the care manager will fill out that form. But I definitely need all of that information. And then from that, most of the time, I do need an important physician's release to exercise form. And it's wonderful if it's filled out completely. So I not only have what I should avoid with this client, but I have what I should focus on. And I have the intensity and the duration that I should focus on that.
And that really, that
sorry, go ahead.
Deborah. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. What I think is quite interesting is it's not just the person filling it out. It's a caregiver, it's a child, it's one of the medical professionals. That's really interesting. And sorry, please go ahead.
No, that's okay. Feel free to interrupt me because I'll just talk. I want to know where my client lives. What environment are they in? So it's not the typical where, the younger clients, well, okay, they live at home. They may or may not live with family. So some of our clients and the older adults, they might be living in a senior living community. And if that's the case, I want to know what care they're receiving. Are they in memory care? Are they in assisted living, or are they in independent living? And with that, there are different services within those senior living centers. So sometimes they'll have exercise classes there, right? So I want to know, is my client participating in that? I want to look at the whole picture. What does my client's life look like? If they're living alone and they're trying to age in place and they have health concerns, that's definitely something I want to key in on, right? And focus on activities of daily living, fall prevention, functional movements, those types of things. I also want to know who else is working with my client. So are they working with an occupational therapist, a physical therapist? Even I want to know, are they getting therapeutic massage for those dealing with lymphedema from cancer treatment? I want to know if they're getting cancer treatment. Are they regularly seeing a physician? I want to know, one of my clients who is in memory care, he has these people who come on the days I'm not with him and they take him for walks. So I want to know that too, because I want to get the full picture of what type of activity my client has.
And I'm assuming you had said earlier that you always get a release from the physician. That's very, very important. You guys who are on this Zoom, you guys know I'm a lawyer, so I'm adamant about that. And health history forms are really, really crucially important. Deborah, I love that you brought that up. You've got to know all that's going on with these individuals, but you want to limit your liability on that. So on the bottom of your health history forms, guys, you need to put in that this interview is limited for me to use this only for general recommendation purposes during this interview. I'm not required to utilize this information in my personal training. Because if you've got a number of clients, you're not going to always refer back to your paper, or you may forget in that health history form, they said they had a stroke like 10 years ago, but now they're fine. So it's kind of interesting. I think that's very important to bring up. And I love, Deborah, that you talked about integrating their wellness care. I think that is also very important. And you're dealing with, large group and small group. So how do
Right.
you keep all this information like up there?
Well, we have a pretty big system, operating system that we can keep that information, and we add notes to the system all the time on a daily basis. So there's always a follow-up. But I think to add to Deborah, can I say another thing that I want to assess is their social life. Do you know, I think so many people come to our facility for social fitness, and it's huge, right? And being socially younger is one of the ways that we age or not. And so when we're doing that full health history assessment, Deborah, great recommendation. I also want to see how they move through space, but I'm also going to find out what they're doing socially and if that socialization is important to them. And I think large group and small group just leads into that social fitness focus.
And you've been very successful with the small group training. Deborah, I know you focus on the one-on-one, but Anne, talk about the small group training and the larger group training and what that's done to help your business.
Well, we have a program called Elite, which is kind of scary once in a while because people sometimes think that they have to be an elite athlete to join, but really it's actually growing. We're having a meeting tomorrow with the head trainers in the facility to add some times, even in the fall, which is usually not the time where you would add groups. The group allows people to feel like they are part of a community. It really is the gist of selling a community, not necessarily a workout. At Shapes, we're all women, we love to belong. So we sell the act of, the idea of belonging to a community. And we have 4 to 8 people usually in our average small group training, and we've been successful with it for years and years. One, it's camaraderie, it's community, and it's confidence. And if they're fearful of walking into a large group, because what if we don't grapevine the right way? And what if we don't know the choreography of, I've never picked up a weight before? And what if I see myself in the mirror? All those fears that go along with walking into the traditional fitness studio. Small group diminishes those fears because they have a buddy in their friend. They have positive competition working with each other. And it gives the coach an opportunity to really give personal attention while instilling that social camaraderie thing. I'm big on those camaraderie and community thing.
And Robert, how, what are the considerations when you're designing program and how do you start them out?
First of all, I'm sorry for my internet issues here. We're in Las Vegas, and the building itself has been losing internet on and off all day long. So sorry if I drop off.
There we go. Robert, I think we lost him.
Let me help
come back.
Can I help him on this?
I don't think he can hear us. I think he's going to have to drop off and come back on. We'll get him.
Can I take that question for you, Pam?
Yeah, would you? Anne, please.
Okay, I think Robert and I agree, and Deborah, that keeping it simple is super important. And really designing programs around essential movements. And I know he's going to say to hinge and row, to bend and row is an essential action for the active ager. A push, a pull, a single leg movement at some time in their program, and even some type of rotation, mobility and rotation. And keeping it simple allows those base movements to then evolve. And it allows the trainer not always to create progressions, but options on a day-to-day basis. So I'm finding that as I get to my 40th year in this business, I have less choreography, less exercises on my program sheet or my workout sheet. And it's always about those essential movements. And then it's much easier for the coach to stay in tune to how that body is moving. Keep it stupid simple, 5 to 6 basic movements. And I think when he comes back on, he'll agree.
That is interesting. What are your thoughts about that? How do you integrate, Deborah, you do these questionnaires, which are great, but then how do you assuage some of the fear that these new athletes, shall we call them, our activators that are coming at us, how do we approach them and how do we get them committed? And I loved your mission of my goal is to train them so that they do this on their own and they never come back. And I think you're lying, but that's okay.
So it's interesting that you said goal, because our clients are, their goals are so vast, and that is going to be something that's going to motivate them, right? So I have a client who's 95 and he's in assisted living, and his whole goal in life is to get back up on that walker. So you better believe when he doesn't feel like exercising, I'm reminding him of that goal, and then he perks up a little bit, right? So I feel like part of that assessment, I neglected to get to it at first, but is really understanding what is their goal. And that also becomes their motivator, right? So that's super important. You also want to know who's their support team, because a lot of times we need our clients to be exercising on days they're not with us. And if they're not going to exercise on their own, or some of my clients are not able to exercise on their own, you need to figure out how we can get support for this person so that they will make more progress, right? Because if I'm just there 2 days a week and that's the only time my client is moving, the progress is going to be very slow. But if we can have family members come in, watch what we're doing, and then support that, that will help. And I feel like that will motivate them too.
Oh, I think that's great. My husband just went through knee surgery, and he tore his meniscus and he tore it off his bone. So he had to get a hook put in, sewn the meniscus up, put it back in place, and fix it in place. And he was on crutches for 6 weeks, absolutely no weight bearing. Yeah, it was real pleasant. And yeah, because sorry, Robert, but men handle this so well. Anyway, so I've got him on crutches, and I went to the physical therapist with him. And then it's very supportive. I mean, I know it, he's a grown man. He does it. Frankly, I don't think he wanted me there, but it does. It is that supportive thing. And Robert, I know you ran away, but thank you for coming back. We appreciate it. So when you're designing a program for older adults, you consider their unique abilities, and I love your philosophy on assessing them. And I love it. So I'm going to let you take the field, buddy.
It's simplicity is key. The two things that we get from trainers asking us how to do what we do is, how do we work with older pops and how do we do it without hurting them? And we got to look at, as Deborah was saying, the individual as a whole. The best way to do that is without them really knowing that we're assessing them. So I don't even like using that word, assessment. They're coming in for a movement observation. We'll have clients come in and I'll ask them to, hey, can you get onto the ground? And they go, I think so. And I'll be like, well, we'll pop down on the mat over here, and I'll watch them get down. I go, you know what? Actually, I think I want you to lay down over here. Can you get back up real quick? And they'll get up and they'll struggle and roll their eyes, and then they'll come over and get down. I'm like, actually, no, I think I do want you back over here. So I'll watch them get up and down twice and see how they tolerate, me. And then I'll say, okay, we're going to sit down at this box and then just stand back up. And you go for like 30 seconds, just go for it. And as minimal instruction as I can do, hey, grab onto this band. Let me see you do some rows. Let me watch you walk back and forth. Can you stay on this line? Can you hold on to this weight? And it's going to take them through like a little mock workout. It's fairly simple, but it's our professional assessment. And the reason that we do it that way is, if I asked all of you right now, I would like to assess your posture, what's everybody going to do? Yep. Yeah, there you go. Everybody does it, right? So as soon as you know what I'm looking for, you change what you would naturally do. I saw this with my wife. She's a runner, and we go in to get some fancy shoes at a place out here called Fleet Feet. And the guy goes, hey, I'm going to watch you would run. And so all of a sudden she's Michael Johnson. I mean, she's got this perfect technique and she's crushing it. And she comes back and I'm like, what are you doing? And she goes, what? I'm like, you don't run like that. You've never run like that. And she goes, well, he said he wanted to watch me run. And so we start to see that people will show you what they think you want to see, not what they actually do. If I can get a true impression of someone, what does their posture naturally look like? What is their walking gait? What is their overall grip strength? That's a dynamometer test that we'll do. I want to see their hinge and reach. We'll measure that against the wall. Their overhead range of motion, their hip hinging ability. Can they get up and down off the floor? Those are basically the 6 things that I'll look for. And we'll do all that with kind of a general snapshot assessment, make some notes, and from there, we can start to build our program built around a hinge, a pole, something that gets overhead, and something that transfers weight. Those 4 things make up pretty much every daily life locomotive based movement pattern that they would perform on a regular basis. So we're
Very
truly
cool.
training for life.
Yeah. Anne brought that up and said she knew you would say that, but do that again for us, just so everybody on the call can hear.
The hinge,
One
a
Yeah.
row, some type of overhead action. I'll explain that in a moment, and a carry. Those are the 4 things. And the reason we say some kind of overhead action is if people can overhead press, then we'll do that. If they can't overhead press via some type of muscular imbalance, not necessarily a structural, I've got an AC separation or a labral tear. If they just have a muscular imbalance, they could still pull from overhead. They just may not be able to push from overhead. So we call that groove in the path. If I can still train the path of vertical action, even though I'm pulling from it, not pushing, the body will learn that action. And then I could do shoulder raises and face pulls, and I could build strength that will, retract my scapula and eventually kind of open up the joint of my shoulder to allow me to press overhead someday. So I just need something that I can check off on the box for this particular client that allows an overhead range of motion to occur. And if they have some type of structural damage, I have a client that's got an AC separation in one shoulder, but he's 82, and they're like, we're not going to fix it. He won't rehabilitate well. He has osteoporosis. There's damage. We do the best we can with this side. We do everything to its maximum on the other side. So a lot of times, the ship is sailing a little bit with some of these folks. We're going to do the best we can with what we have in front of us. But with others, we could, I talked about it a little bit off air before we started. I think mostly everybody's seen that image of the disability threshold. You start off severely disabled as a baby. You can't do anything but hold up your own head. And you start to build strength, and right around 30, 35, you're at your peak. You're your most powerful, you're most strong, you're most conditioned, maximum potential. Bone density is at its highest. Cognition is at its highest. Muscular strength is at its highest. Cardiovascular output, VO2 max, everything across the board. Balance, coordination, etc. Right around 35, if you don't train, you're going to start to taper. And you could taper relatively quick to right around 60. People can enter the disability threshold, which means you're not dependent on someone else to take care of you. Someone else now has responsibilities of helping maintain your life and quality. But if you train just a little bit, 20 minutes twice a week, work in the garden, you play tennis or pickleball, then you can extend that out another 10 years before you hit that disability threshold. And if you train a lot, resistance training 3 days a week, you go on walks, you golf, you go hiking, yoga, tai chi, you're doing a lot of different active-based activities appropriate to your aging program, but resistance training at the foundation of it, you can stay and taper away from that threshold and hopefully never touch it. Hopefully you'll get to a point where you're 105 and you just drop dead of a heart attack and lights out, going out with the boots on. And so we say, I don't want you to have days where they're slowly tapering towards death, laying in a bed for 6 weeks. I don't want that. I want them completely capable and lights out.
And I think that's
the
what
highest
we're
quality
all,
they can have.
I think that's what we're all looking at here, is trying to be the best we can for our older adults. Now, Deborah, you work pretty heavily with retirement centers and senior living centers and even physicians' offices and the like. How do you secure your clients? How did you get these clients in the first place?
So I had to put myself out there. I'm no longer affiliated with any clubs. So it's just me, myself, and I. And so I started researching networking groups. And I'm sure my area is not the only area with hundreds of different networking groups. And I found one that is focused on senior care. So it's basically 55 plus, and it's any profession that focuses on older adults, but there's only one of each professional. So I am their fitness professional. And actually, you don't just join, you have to be invited to join. So you attend 2 of their meetings, they interview you, and they're looking for people who have integrity, who are looking for the wellness of the person, no matter what their profession is. And I was lucky enough to get invited. So we meet once a month. We all have roles. I'm actually the web designer and the marketer for the networking group. So it's not just I go and I have fun and I network. There's actually jobs to be done, and it costs some money, but it is expanded my reach. So there was a care manager in my networking group, and she was the first person who said, I have a client who's in memory care and I'd really like to hire you. And once that happens and people see you working with clients and you go and you have to sign them out and there's a whole protocol, word spreads pretty quickly, because I wish there was hundreds of people like me who were willing to go into these senior living communities and give these older adults the one-on-one attention that they need and that they really, really want. Because there was one time, super sad story, they have a fitness room, which I only take my client in the fitness room if it's raining because he prefers to exercise outside. Check him out of memory care, took him in there. And this woman wandered in and she sat down and we started chatting and she just said, I'm lonely. And she just about broke my heart. And so we just included her in the conversation. I'm going off tangent here. I'm sorry about that. But that's how I got to know my networking group.
But that, it still is word of mouth.
It's totally word of
social
mouth.
media is another way for word of mouth. And how are you able to get your clients?
And we do a lot with referral. We feel as though if someone's finally made a commitment and a decision to join a program, and they're dedicated and they stick with it, then they're going to be the best voice box that we have. So most of our new member involvement comes from the buddy referral system. I believe in referral. When people can become the salesperson, also believe in collaboration with other senior experts in the area, because Robert may live in Tampa or Deborah might live in Tampa, and they may have a client that needs a public facility. I may need a client that needs to have a virtual experience with Deborah or Robert, et cetera. So I think collaboration is increasing. We're only working in the traditional fitness facilities with about 20% of the population in Tampa. So there's 80% out there that are out there for the picking. So I think referral is huge. And then collaboration with other professionals, or like you said, networking.
Oh, that's great. And Heidi just asked a question that Robert, I believe, answered, but she works with aging clients with balance issues, and she tries to work with them in balance. And she said, I'm curious as to what everyone's go-to exercises for balance. And she says she's looking to learn more exercises to mix up with the client. It's like, yeah, do we all want to start and do the tree pose for yoga? Robert, how did you answer this, and can you elaborate?
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of the general ideas or basic ideas around balance training is, and this is the one we've all heard a million times, I stand on one foot when I brush my teeth, or something along those lines. And that gets you really good at standing on one foot and brushing your teeth. It has nothing to do with your ability to move and coordinate and walk forward and backward, side to side, carry load, pick up load, transfer load, etc. So if you are able to implement those types of strategies into your regular resistance training, as the resistance training is kind of the foundation that helps us stay really stable. If you're more stable, your balance will be that much more efficient. So what I mean by that is, when you're performing a cable row, stagger your feet. The simple staggering of your feet with your dominant leg or non-dominant leg, do 10, switch your feet, do 10 more. The next time you do it, bring your feet near in line. If you get better at that, hold them completely in line. Do one arm rows, unilateral row versus a bilateral row. Encourage different angles of pull, from high, from low, with one arm, with both arms, pronated handles to supinated handles, all the way down to the idea of closing one eye. We call it pirate style, right? And then you have to jar while they row. We will work different angles of attack and all this. All of this challenges their body to coordinate and move into more real life mimicked components, because you're now implementing a force production against another load. That's what you're going to do when you pick up your groceries and carry those somewhere else. You're not going to stand on one foot, balance, and then all of a sudden fall over and break your hip. We're going to be walking, we're carrying something out of the car, we trip over the curb, stumble, fall. That's how we do it. So I want them to practice lowering their center of mass, dropping a foot behind them, pulling onto something, and then returning back to the standing position, because now they learn how to do that quickly, explosively, under load, under tension, reactive. Those are the actions that will build up and help them improve their balance.
That's great. And what are some of the common challenges or barriers that older adults face when starting a program or continuing the program? And how do you address them, Anne?
I think one of the things, just to kind of cling on to Robert, is that their inability to understand what it feels like to activate muscle when people start, just that teaching a body awareness, making them understand what's happening, and like Robert said, in all three planes of motion, how to narrow the stance, widen the stance, and just make them aware of what their body feels like when they're going through the actions. I think I've spent too many years trying to teach people how to execute a joint movement rather than really teach them what it feels like. It's very empowering for the active ager once they understand where they're supposed to feel and where they're supposed to work from. And I think it just makes them want to know more. So empowerment comes from education and mind-body awareness and how the body moves through the three planes of action. I believe that, rather than teaching an exercise. Teach what the body is doing and what it feels like and where the action should be felt. It's hard to activate a glute when it's been sitting down for a long time. Think about it. So you can say, we end up saying things like squeeze this. No, activate and teach people from the inside out what it feels like to have muscle balance in all three planes. Agree? Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do we, Deborah, we want to challenge them. You want to get them to lift. You want them to do things on imbalance, like on one leg or staggered, like Anne and Robert were talking about, with one arm and not necessarily both arms, so that they feel the instability and they're able to react. But how do you balance that with your safety, with the safety concerns?
Right, absolutely. So that's where understanding who your client is as a whole comes in, right? Because each person is so different, and we need to figure out how we can meet them where they're at and build them up from there. And so if you're talking about, I do teach Zoom classes for active older adults. In those situations, specifically if you're talking about the resistance training segment, I offer different levels, right? So I'll offer a row, or I'll say row, on one leg, row with a opposite hip extension. Now go. And everybody will choose what's right for them that day. Now, knowing my clients, I'll keep special eye on certain clients who, I know have this issue or that issue, and I'll cue the whole class because I don't like to single out people in a class environment. But I'll, for those of you with knee concerns, okay, some of us are doing side step, some of us are doing side lunge, go, kind of thing. So they feel like, oh, I'm still in class. I might have, knee osteoarthritis, but I'm still moving and I'm still here. And that is, they're working to their full capacity.
Yeah. And I liked what you brought up before, is that it's nice to remind them of their goals. If you want to go to your grandchild's wedding, right? That's, imagine how old they have to be. But if you want to go to, are you going to go on a hike? Are you going on a group tour or on a cruise where you want to be able to do excursions? So they've got these goals in mind, and it does keep them motivated. I really like that, Deborah, that you brought that up before. And also, what are strategies for modifications do you recommend when you're training individuals with age-related conditions like arthritis or osteoporosis? I'm going to ask you again, start with you, Deborah.
So you definitely have guidelines for specifically osteoarthritis and osteoporosis, but also all the other age-related conditions. So I'm going to refer back to my first statement, which is get that physician's release form, because even if we take a course on how fitness trainers can work with people with osteoporosis, we still need that physician's release form. So please don't forget that. There are specific guidelines that we can go by. So for osteoarthritis, you want to focus on strengthening the musculature around that specific joint so that the joint is more stable, hence less painful. So learning what those muscles are for each different type of osteoarthritis is really key. Each one has its own protocol as far as what muscles are typically tight and what muscles are typically weak. So along with our regular assessment, where we look at their posture and how they move to figure out what muscles need to be stretched and what muscles need to be strengthened, we have these in addition. So the protocol for osteoarthritis is to start with isometrics or just very low load, and you want to go slow. If you slow as in progress slow, because that way, if the client gets a flare up, you'll know, okay, that's as far as I can push this client. So now I'm going to back up. So for example, your rep range, I would start with one set of 10 repetitions for at least 2 consecutive workouts, and then see how the client reacts. If all goes well, instead of increasing the load, I would go to 2 sets of 10 reps, and then finally 3 sets of 10 reps, and eventually 3 sets of 15 reps before I even consider increasing the load. So very slow. And the same with cardiovascular. So walking, 5 to 10 minutes, no incline. And if they want to do more, rest a couple of hours and then go out and do more. No flare up, slowly increase the duration before you increase the intensity. So for walking, of course, that would be uphill. Again, if we jump too far into it, we won't know where's the line, right? So this way, we know exactly how far we can push that client. For I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask, and this is, advice for arthritis, but it also seems like really good advice for way to begin your protocol almost with any active ager who's been inactive.
It's true. It's true, because when we change too many things, we think, oh, every workout has to be new, has to be exciting. And then something happens. What did it? What created the flare up? So for osteoporosis, there are specific restrictions as far as the movement from the spine, right? So it's from moving from the spine, it shouldn't be forceful, end range, weighted. You don't want to do spinal flexion, rotation, or side bending, or any combination of that. You want to teach them the hip hinge, like Robert said, and have them move from the hip. But even with the hip, they caution if you have osteoporosis that you don't want to do forceful end range hip rotation. So those are the guidelines. So we're very, very cautious with that. And again, there's specific protocols for osteoporosis. We want to get into, we might have to build them up, but to the 8 to 12 rep range. And you want to be addressing each muscle group.
Oh, that's good. That's great to know. Anna, I'm going to hit you up with this as well in 1 second. I'm going to ask, I know some of us could use a waiver of liability that, might help them. Carter, when we post the recording, why don't we include the Mania, our Mania convention waiver? And then we'll give it to you guys as business advice. I can't give it to you as legal advice, but I can give it to you as business advice. And that might help you guys to at least have a foundation. We'll put that on the recording. Anne, please talk to us about our safety guidelines like Deborah did. And I know because I choreographed the flexibility track for SEAT, our SEAT fitness program. And she's like, Sarah, you can't do forward flexion like that. I'm like, okay. All right. So Anne, hit us up here.
Well, I believe in everything that Deborah and Robert have said to this point, but I think osteoporosis is something that needs to be studied by everybody that is training with an active ager. And I think the biggest thing is if you're transitioning from what we call traditional fitness, I think loading the spine is something that is controversial. That means that contraindicated in a sense. There's another way to add load or volume, and that's changing tempos and keeping the movement in the sagittal plane more than adding the rotation in the transverse plane. But I think we have to be careful making this transition from traditional fitness classes where we loaded the spine Remember, I have a pair of scissors, but you think it's a 10-pound dumbbell, right, guys? But remember how we've seen people that literally load their spine. There's so many safer and more effective ways. Even wearing a backpack is a better way than loading the spine with a bar. So just be aware in the traditional setting. Now, Deborah works from home and from Zoom. She isn't exposed to those things that I am in the traditional setting, but loading the spine is something to be very aware of. And I also think that there's a misconception on a lot of members that do have osteoporosis, and they say, well, I have to do weight bearing. And I think the assumption is that that means walking, which is great, but you can also train very effectively in the pool on the eccentric phase using buoyancy underneath. You can train very effectively from a chair. And you're talking to someone that used to say, get out of the chair no matter what. Well, now if 80% of the people that we have an opportunity to work with are still in a chair, why don't we use the chair as a safe and effective tool to get them up and participating in activities of daily life? But loading the spine, I think, is something that you better be aware of. And the misconception of your clients who have been told they have been diagnosed and assume that weight bearing means on the ground. It doesn't. It means that real natural tug of muscle against bone. So I think it's important for you to really learn.
Robert, any comments on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I put on here the arthritic grace period, this 2 to 12 week period that people will have to react with. You could kind of fill that in with the anything grace period. If they're beginner lifters, if they have osteoporosis, if they have arthritis, basically it's a period of time in a training program, assuming this individual is completely green, they're just starting off, where it's going to take about 2 weeks to 12 weeks, where their body is going to adapt to the idea of what I'm doing is now a regular occurrence that I'm going to be exposed to every other day or every 3 days. It's just like building calluses on your hands or tough skin to sun exposure or whatever it might be. Your body is going to adapt to this. Where the adaptation is with this disease in particular is, like Deborah said, is managing the flare up. And so keeping everything as sagittal as possible in the beginning and as neutral as possible, meaning when you're rowing, a neutral grip, row along the sagittal plane, that's it. A push, sagittal plane, neutral, that's it. Don't add any rotations to it, anything else. So you're minimizing as much potential for a flare up as you can, but you're still training all these actions. And after 2 to 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, whatever people will have, their bodies will start to adapt to this, and the flare-ups or the little aggravations that they have won't begin to occur as much, or they won't happen at all. We're not going to cure arthritis. Most cases, you're not going to cure their osteoporosis. What we are going to do, hopefully, is stop their bone loss in its track and maintain it there, and or decrease the symptoms of their arthritic pain via the resistance training, the range of motion you're adding to this. And after that grace period has been achieved, again, it's different for everybody. So once you get through this a bit and people are starting to feel comfortable in what they're doing, now we level up that challenge. Again, like Deborah and Ambo said, not necessarily by changing the load, but now by introducing angles of pull where you can pronate, supinate, and rotate through certain movements or change different angles that you're pulling at. Go from a bilateral farmer carry to a unilateral suitcase carry. Ipsilateral rows is changing all those different angles. The body's now going to have another 2 to 12 week period where it's going to have to adapt to that. So you can baby step this up to the point where people almost forget that they have these issues. I will do anything and everything I can to help my client not take medications. I'm not going to drop names, but there are medications out there for them specific to bone density issues where the results on these meds are not good. If not 50%, if not more of them that are taking them, it doesn't even work. It makes it worse. So, but they're the big key names that are out there. And think of it more like a PVC pipe where the osteoblast and the osteoclast no longer have their exchange of breaking down bone and building it back up. It basically just capsulates the bone, makes the outside hard, and the inside is now hollow, and your body stops producing more bone density, but your score goes up. So now, step on a PVC pipe, what happens? It shatters into pieces rather than a semi-dense bone that's trying to rebuild itself, splintering and being put back together with a screw. So I will do everything I can to not have my clients go in that direction unless it's absolute necessity. We'll try to do this in a way where we can implement in good health and nutrition, good sleep, good rest, good recovery, but a good resistance training program, active recovery, mobility work, stability training, etc., to try to get them over that hump.
Oh, that's excellent. I got to tell you guys, I'm sitting here, I just glanced at my phone. I'm like, we've been going for 44 minutes. We've got 1 minute left. Deborah, fabulous stuff. Love it. You guys look for Tough Agers. I know I'm going to ask Carter to put it into the chat one more time. Ann Gilbert, thank you for Seat Fitness. And Robert, thank you so much for training the older adults. Love it. I'm going to show you guys real quickly. We have our wonderful Dallas Mania coming up. It's at the end of August, and I think you guys have maybe seen this website here. Here is where you can look. We get 20 CECs, over 150 sessions. We have almost 50 presenters, and we have about 14 different certifications that we're listing. And you can take a look at the conference. So thank you guys. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys next month. We're doing our monthly webinars. Thank you all. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Robert. Take care. And thank you, Carter, for putting this all together. Really appreciate it.
Thank
All
you,
right,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great night.